All right, so lately I've sort of lost my zest for reselling, which is what I do to make money every month. So that is a bit of an issue. But this is normal with being self employed. I have these sort of highs and lows that go with it. And so I'm in one of the lows. And a big part of that is I'm having coming off of this huge mental shift, pretty much getting a really, really low in 2022, getting out of this depression. It's been a really big challenge, and the thing is, when you're self-employed, you have to figure it out as you go. And so that's what I'm doing, and how I'm sort of trying to push past this is I'm trying to get help with bookkeeping, because that is something I am not great with. I can keep track of the numbers, but when I was depressed, I was not staying on top of it. And so having to kind of put all the pieces together now, it's it's overwhelming because I have the data, but I have to sort the data and I have to do all the addition, subtraction, all the stuff that used to be automatic with my bookkeeping service. And there's things about eBay and Poshmark that have changed that I haven't kept up with. Poshmark with the live sales, I find that so distracting, and I personally don't have any interest in having live sales. So I have to wonder, is that going to affect me doing business on Poshmark in the future? Is that going to hurt my store? eBay, I have to get back in with international shipments. I stopped international shipments during the pandemic, and now we have the ability to access that again. Or, I mean, I have the mental capacity to tackle that again, and now they've completely overhauled their international program. So I'm working on that, like my business policies. And there's just a lot of moving parts. So when I start to feel in a little bit of a funk, or like I've lost my enthusiasm, I find it's best to go outside of myself, take some time to learn about someone else's story, gain inspiration from somebody else, so that I guess I can glean parts of their life and apply those same principles in my own situation when it applies. So let's talk a little bit about Van Gogh. I learned about Van Gogh when I was in art school, I'm sure, but when I was in school, I didn't really pay much attention. Now, my son, he's 9 years old, he was learning about Van Gogh in school. So, Nico, being who he is, he loves to teach other people. So, he was teaching me a lot about Van Gogh. And what I found interesting about this was a lot of these things sort of stuck in my head. Now I'm going through a rough patch and I'm learning. I'll go over a little bit about this in a minute, but as I'm sort of getting inspired by that book, I'm also remembering these parts that I learned of Van Gogh. And what I found so encouraging was, during his lifetime, Van Gogh was not this world famous artist that he is, sort of like now this world renowned artist that everybody knows his work, and his work sold for astounding sums of money. But when he was alive, he was sort of seen as a failure, and he was locked up in the insane asylum for part of his life. People sort of wrote him off as like this nut job, you know? And but Van Gogh didn't let that stop him. He did not let that stop him from creating the work that he believed he was destined to create. He did huge volumes of work in his lifetime, even though in his lifetime he was considered basically commercially a failure. You know, his work wasn't selling for large amounts of money. It wasn't able to support him in the way that, like, if he was alive today and his work sold for that, he'd be insanely rich. But during his time, he struggled, and he struggled with mental health. And he also was, what I thought was interesting was, he was an avid writer, and people didn't really know this about him other than his close friends and family. Just from what I learned, was he was writing his brother so many letters. His brother could only write back like maybe one to every 10 that Van Gogh sent, or maybe one to every 20. His brother would return the letter, because that's how quick he was and how much he was writing. And it also speaks to like how much he created in his lifetime. So what I picked up was this time, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, Creative Living Beyond Fear. What I'm learning is I've been given a natural ability to create art. And what's so upsetting about that is I found ways throughout my whole entire life to sort of squander this gift I was so freely given. And I want to dedicate the rest of my life to actually giving art the time and the effort that it deserves. So basically, honoring my gift. Now, in Big Magic, she talks about taking these vows. Like when she's really young, she talks about deciding that she wants to be an author and taking these vows to write every day and to take that as seriously as most people take something like their marriage vows. So for me, I have the tendency, my default tends to be sort of negativity in a way. Like my default is to focus on the things that I didn't do right and how I wasted so much of my time being all wrapped up with drugs and mixed up in the street, and how I thought that was what I was destined to do. For as crazy as it sounds now, for the longest time I truly thought I was destined to be infamous as a criminal. I thought that was going to be my thing. And now it's easy to look back on those times and think, how could I have done that stuff? How could I have been so far gone? How could I have been so evil? And instead of focusing on that, that's done. That is a part of my story. Those things will always carry with me. I can't, just because I'm out of therapy, I'm not magically going to not have this history and all these things that I went through. That is a part of what I did, and I can't erase it, right? But instead of focusing on what I should have done and how I got really dark and demented, and some might even say psychotic, my story doesn't have to end there. Like how she says in the book, at any point you can choose to reroute your life. And I want to take vows to myself like she took vows to be an author. I've decided I have to keep mine more realistic, and I don't like to publicly profess goals. So this is a little different than a goal because it's going to affect my everyday life. So I'm dedicating 15 minutes a day to art, not putting any pressure on it. So pretty much what you're hearing me say is what I'm getting out of the book. I love this idea that I do with art what she did with writing. I will dedicate 15 minutes a day, and if I can go longer, that's great. If I get like into the groove of it and I want to go longer, there's no rules against that. But it will force me to do something every day, even when I don't feel like it. Now, the good thing is I like to do a lot of different sorts of art. So making videos is art. Sewing is art. Drawing is art. Writing is art. And I like to do all of those things. So what I've been finding is on the days that I'm just completely physically drained from workouts or from work, then I have a bunch of papers sitting by my chair that I can just write for 15 minutes. And at the end of it, I don't have to save the item if I don't want. I don't have to feel like I have to put it out somewhere. I don't have to put out every video I record. I don't have to expect my art to take care of me financially. Like, just like she did in the book, she just vowed that she would do the work and kind of hone her craft. And I feel I owe it to myself that. So between the two, the main thing that's sticking out to me personally is when I was in the absolute worst of my drug addiction. So when I was shooting up, I remember very vividly, like, I could never seem to use enough. And this probably had a lot to do with the fact that at this point in my addiction, I was physically dependent on the drugs. So we were in drug dependency, which is a lot darker than how the early stages of my addiction were. So I was never able to use enough to completely escape these things that went on in my head that constantly nagged at me and bothered me. And I remember I would have sometimes moments of clarity, and I was at a random park with my boyfriend at the time, shooting up in the dugout. So here I am hunched over, shooting up in kind of a shameful, secret sort of way. And just like IV drug use is, it's this sort of shameful secret that you don't tell very many people, because most people will completely just they will get all their hatred out on you for using in that manner. And so here I am at one of my all-time lowest points, and just looking out on the baseball field and just having this thought of, I'm supposed to be out there. Like, I have it in me to be a starter. I'm supposed to be an all-star. I'm supposed to be playing. I'm supposed to be, and this is all metaphorical. So in that mental state, I have no idea what I thought I was supposed to be playing, but I think it was just symbolic of, here I am in my life. I'm almost 30 years old. I was in my late 20s, and I'm just slumped over here, just like barely surviving every day. I'm miserable. I can't escape the misery that I carry with me, that just lingers on with every use. I can't escape this pain. I'm not escaping this pain. Nothing's getting better. Everything's getting worse. People are dying. People are getting locked up. I'm going to go to prison. Or I'm just going to die. And is this how I want to end? But I felt it in me that I wanted to be out there. I wanted to live on the field, not in the dugout. And so now, as I'm reading about all these artists, and I'm sort of having that aha moment again of, I was given the gift of art. I have that natural desire to make things and to be creative and to express myself in that way. But I found ways throughout my whole life to sort of just drop it down and pick it up like it was this luxury. But the thing is, we all have these things that we could naturally excel at better than somebody else if we give it the dedicated time and attention it deserves. And so that's what I want to do from now until the rest of my life. This isn't some goal that I'm putting out there that it can't be attained. It just needs the time and dedication that I put towards other things. What about all the time I dedicated to using drugs? I could take those hours and now dedicate it to something much more worthwhile. And that's what I'm doing, and that's what I'm promising myself, and those are the vows I'm giving myself. It's attainable, it's doable. I just have to do it in little chunks. And as I go along, if I do things that I want to share, I'm happy to share it with you. But I would also want to know from you, is there something like that you have in you that you're not expressing, or you're not putting out into the world because you're just kind of bogged down with your day-to-day life, and with everything that's going on with inflation, it just feels like a luxury, something that it's just out of reach and it's not the right time. And it may never be the right time for me to just take time for art. But if I don't do that, I know that it's going to forever bother me deep inside. It'll always be this huge thing that I'm like, if this gift was so freely given to me, I at least owe it to give it back out into the world just as it was given to me. At least owe it to develop it and put it out in the world and not expect anything back in return. If my art was to ever help me financially or provide for me, that would be like an icing on the cake, but that wouldn't be the expectation. The expectation is just to do it, to pursue it, to put it out there, and then to not feel like I've left something behind. Like, I hope that when I pass, you find huge amounts of work in my house. And I'm not saying like I'm going to be like the next Van Gogh, but I just think that more of us have it in us to do more than we're pushing ourselves to do. So that's what I wanted to share today. And on that note, I probably actually should get to work.